Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are welcome to the Smart Cities and Sports Summit for this very special edition exclusively online. Tonight, it's our very last session of these two-day conferences. I hope that you already enjoyed all the different topics, all the different speakers that share their experience with us during these 2 days. For tonight, we will have two sessions in a row. The first dedicated to women in sport and the second to active tourism. And in order to handle this, I'm very glad to invite once again Bill Morris. I think that Bill, you should be online. Excellent. So Bill Morris will be the facilitator for tonight's session. The floor is yours for this next session.
Yes, thanks, Melanie. The last lap of this year's summit, but two very significant topics to conclude with. In an hour or so, as you heard, we'll address active tourism and how sports events can be the lever to promote it. But first, we focus on gender equality. Women's sport has taken major steps forward in recent years. Few could disagree with that. But it's equally clear that it still has a long way to go. And what impact on that trajectory does COVID-19 play? Some will already notice that when the virus hits and money and resources are tight, well, it seems that the big men's professional leagues and sports muscle their way back to recovery first. Others are convinced that the pandemic is offering the global society a reset button and that women's sport can use this to leverage more investment, more attention, better understanding, and the realities of equality. Well, who's right? To illuminate that vital question, we have expert analysis and two case studies. As ever, we really value your input too. We love to see your comments, experiences, and suggestions on the chat function. And do add your questions to our speakers too. If we have time, I'll add them to them during our discussion, but if not, we'll certainly pass them on. So to set the scene, our expert analysis this evening comes from Lilamani de Souza. Lila has been a researcher, an analyst, a participant, a leader, and a champion of women's sport for over 2 decades. Originally from Sri Lanka, her work in sport, particularly in table tennis and international relations, has taken her all over the world, including major contributions on gender equality to the IOC and the United Nations. She's also worked at the International Academy for Sport Studies in Japan. So Lila, who I think is in the studio in Lausanne, please set the scene for us.
Thank you, Bill. Thank you. Very privileged and happy to be here. This is very impressive. It's a big change from Tokyo. And I am so sorry that we cannot see each other face to face, especially here in Lausanne, which is the city, the smart city where I live. But as they would say in Tokyo, shogunai, it is what it is. And thank you again for inviting me to this year's summit to speak a little bit about women and sport. Since our event in Tokyo last year, a lot has happened. Well, you know, COVID happened. And if there's anything positive to be said about COVID, the COVID misery, is that it has reinforced without any doubt the importance of physical activity and the right to move freely and do sport. The pandemic has also shown the extraordinary strength of women in the front lines and highlighted examples of the value of female leadership in these difficult times. And these are models to follow in sport leadership in the future. I won't go into details about how badly the international sport world has been hit by this crisis. I think we've talked about it enough. Incidentally, how negatively is this affecting girls and women's sport? That's the place to start. Are we doing what it takes to find out how this is affecting girls and women in sport? And are we doing what it takes to ensure that another generation of girls is not sacrificed at the COVID altar? In the midst of the pandemic, we celebrated 25 years of the Beijing Platform for Action. At that occasion, Angela Merkel, Chancellor of Germany, summed it up as follows. 25 years after the Beijing Declaration, equality should be a given. But we still have a long way to go. Get on board. Let's work together to really target the Beijing goals. The faster, the better. I would just like to take this opportunity to congratulate Mrs. Bouchra Hajij of Morocco, who just became the president of the African Volleyball Confederation, replacing the outgoing president who was there for 19 years. UN Women, together with the IOC and other partners, launched Generation for Equality. I hope you all know about that and you're working on that. The IOC has been continuing its work with their gender equality review and recently announced that 47.7% of positions across the 30 commissions are now held by women, which is indeed good news. UNESCO continued its work on SDG 5, which is gender equality, a standalone SDG, and on the Kazan Action Plan. And starting in October last year, I had the opportunity to be involved in a research project for UNESCO related to Action 4 of the Kazan Action Plan, which would lead to a feasibility study for a global observatory for women, sport, PE, and PA. The three major women and sport groups, the YPASCA, which is International Association for Physical Education and Sport for Girls and Women, represented by Tanzin Ben from England, the IWG, International Working Group for Women and Sport, by myself, Women's Sport International by Carol Oglesby from the USA, and an expert from Africa, Maud Dikobi from Botswana. And with the help and collaboration of many academics and experts, conducted 6 months of international research to provide global and regional scoping knowledge and mapping on gender equality in the fields of sport, which included the growing field of sport for development and peace, and PE and PA. Looking at the three domains together across the continents was very enlightening because even if they have distinctive structures, outcomes, aims, and are still experienced differently, our findings reflected the research. There is still a long way to go to have gender equality in sport, PE, and PA on every continent. The research leaves no room for doubt. The WHO has described physical inactivity as a pandemic that seriously impacts health and longevity, with women having less access to PE and PA than men in most countries globally. We identified 5 recurring key themes running through sport, PE, and PA. First, the lack of female representation in sport governance, teaching, and coaching professions. A pandemic-like spread of gender-based violence and harassment, and the need for better safeguarding for the protection of girls and women. UN calls gender-based violence a shadow pandemic. Third, gender inequality in disadvantaged, marginalized groups, further exacerbated by other complex intersecting areas of complication, such as disability, war and political instability, restrictive cultural barriers. Fourth, gender gaps in girls' and women's participation across the lifespan, starting in the school system. And harmful stereotyping, for example, negative medical myths, discrimination in the media, etc. The research on sport for development and elite sport showed ongoing inequality in leadership, media attention, pay gaps, and participation levels. Of course, what's happening during this unprecedented global health crisis is still too early to fully comprehend, but monitor it we must, and evaluate it we must, if we are to come out of this situation and build a better sporting environment for all. Here I would like to mention the work of UN Women and the excellent resources available to understand why gender matters in COVID-19 responses. So I'm a member of the International Working Group for Women and Sport, which has been proactively working to address the disproportionate effect on sport and PA for women and girls. In lockdown already, the IWG launched Change Inspires Change to encourage people to share stories about their work. The New Zealand Secretariat is in the process of developing the IWG Inside Hub to enable sharing and already preparing to run a hybrid IWG World Conference in May 2022 in Auckland, New Zealand, to which you are all cordially invited. In April, the IWG Global Executive came out with a plan to action designed to encourage the nearly 600 signatories to the IWG Brighton and Helsinki Declaration on Women and Sport to lead the world by example. 5 concerns and related opportunities were identified as very likely to emerge due to COVID-19. The impact on the physical and mental well-being of women who are currently in lockdown, working on the front lines, or just juggling with work, kids, family, homeschooling, aging parents, etc. The IWG encouraged a return to out-of-home physical activity as soon as safe, while applauding the work of those encouraging in-home movement. I know that the Swiss TV in this region started an online physical activity program for all, which I was following. That's all good. But what of athletes, their sponsorships, their training schedules, their cancelled competitions, and their uncertain future prospects? What of the adolescent girls around the world who in normal times dropped out of sport and PA? Athletes and previously active women, as well as adolescent female populations, should be supported now, as should those that have developed new habits. Second, the emergence of wider social issues such as the widely documented increase in domestic violence globally. We need to redevelop business models during recovery that ensure females are provided for safely and fairly. Safeguarding women and girls means safeguarding sport. It means safer environments also for boys and all children. I have been following several online discussions about gender-based violence by women's groups in Africa and in Asia. In the midst of all this, one good example I saw materialize was the launch of an anti-harassment policy called Harassment is No Game by the National Olympic Committee of Sri Lanka. So congratulations to them. The recommendation is invest in and implement safeguarding measures. Third, the possibility that money and resources may be taken out of women's sport, like Bill mentioned at the start, in order to support men's sport or other things, or that women's development would be sidelined as a non-priority due to budget restrictions. If you remember, we were in the midst of the struggle of the USA football team for equal pay, which I guess is not over yet. So in other words, please continue to invest in women's sport. The drive for stronger diversity in decision-making structures in sport may slow down, with organizations going back to the old ways out of comfort. So always include women in the creation and implementation of recovery plans. And fifth, the risks that the sector may seek to rebuild what was previously there, rather than reimagine the entire operation to become more inclusive of diverse communities. So let's not just rebuild, but redefine the future. For example, we believe that there is an opportunity for all of us to assist in reimagining delivery of quality physical education for girls in all schools all around the world. The University of Toronto, Canada, investigated whether women compared to male peers were posting fewer studies than they were before lockdowns began. The analysis and several others suggest that across disciplines, the women's publishing rate has fallen relative to men's. So in sport, this would certainly be reflected. And what sport federations, smart cities should be doing is to take this opportunity to increase advocacy, conduct consultations with male and female athletes and their entourage to collect disaggregated data, monitor how the women and girls and men and boys in your sports are affected differently by the pandemic, and have a clear idea of what should be done in the future when we get back to, as Christine Lagarde, President of the European Central Bank, put it, a new world economy. This new world economy must include a new world sport economy that is more humane and sustainable, has better governance, more solidarity, and of course, much more diversity. Thank you for your attention, but just one and a half minutes more, if we can see a little film. Thank you.
Small changes can become great accomplishments. Joining from many sources, they flow together to create something mighty. Change inspires change, each with its own story to tell. Stories shaped by people and people shaped by stories. By changing the way we look at things, the things we look at change. Creating champions who don't live by what's engraved in their trophies, but by what's woven into the lives of others. Mā mua ka kite a muri, mā muri ka ora a mua. The International Working Group on Women in Sport has driven positive change for women and girls for more than 25 years. Aotearoa New Zealand, home to 3 upcoming Women's World Cups, will host our conference in May 2022, the largest gathering on gender equity in sport and physical activity in the world, live in Auckland. Or follow the event virtually, collaborating with your international colleagues. You can also join our global community of action right now online. Mentor, be mentored, inspire, Be inspired. Sign up now to our tapestry of storytelling, woven with countless threads of change, inspiring change. E hara taku toa I te toa takitahi, engari he toa takitini. Add your chapter to this story right now at iwgwomaninsport.org. Change inspires change.
Thank you, Leela, and let us all hope, of course, that by 2022 it's possible to travel to New Zealand. That's something certainly to look forward to. Leela, that was a great tour d'horizon of the topic that we're addressing, and it's also some very clear and straightforward recommendations. Can I just briefly ask you to come back to the kind of opening question I had? You said perhaps it was too early to be sure about the negative or positive impact of COVID-19, but what's your instinct? Do you feel optimistic or pessimistic about what COVID-19 will do for women's sport?
The way things are right now, everything is a bit pessimistic, but I think there are lots of opportunities as well. For example, we have what has happened with all these digital, ways of communicating we need to use. So there are lots of things that could be used. When I talked about physical education, quality physical education in schools, this is something that could be done now a bit better. But girls don't go to school. Less girls go to school than boys, so we need to first get them to school. And the digital platforms now are a great way to somehow make a difference here. So there are lots of opportunities to be taken. For example, there is a new report in Canada called the Rally Report 2020, and I was just looking at it this morning, and it says 68% of girls in Canada are not doing any physical education or sport. I mean, okay, this is a challenge, but this is also an amazing opportunity. So what are we doing? This is the type of thing that we need to question.
Leela, thank you. And do stay with us if you would, because I think you'll be fascinated by the two case studies, and we'll certainly look for your comments on them. Our first case study comes from the Caribbean, from Trinidad and Tobago, to be precise. From there, we're going to hear about a determined campaign to put women into leadership roles in sport. To tell us all about it, we welcome the Secretary General of the Trinidad and Tobago Olympic Committee and Chair of the Women's Commission of the Caribbean National Olympic Committees. She started her career as an international hockey player, but has since become a leader in business, sport administration, events, and a powerful advocate for women's sport. I hope she'll be with us live later on, but to reduce the risk of the gremlins on the internet, she's kindly recorded her presentation for us. So please welcome on tape Annette Knott.
Trinidad and Tobago Olympic Committee would like to thank Smart Cities and Sports Summit for the opportunity to tell the world about the project, The Future is Female. This aims to achieve gender equality as set out by Goal 5 of the Sustainable Development Goals. The operating environment. During this presentation, I'd like to highlight to you what's important and what is needed for this project, this type of project. Not only have we got to think about the operating environment, we also have to think about the leadership and the people that lead the organizations that will encourage gender equality. We also have to look at the project itself, will be highlighted, and of course, we fortunately have with us, also joining us, will be the President of the Olympic Committee, Mr. Brian Lewis. The government of Trinidad and Tobago is committed to building a nation that is free of gender discrimination. The national policy on gender development aims to eliminate all such barriers and advance measures to promote gender equality. In Trinidad and Tobago, we have a number of role models in our leadership. The President of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago is Her Excellency Paula May Weeks, and our Minister of Sport and Community Development is the Honorable Shamfa Kajo. Who needs to join the conversation? What is needed is a leadership that is dedicated to gender equality, with men working along with women to create the gender parity. The Trinidad and Tobago Olympic Committee, led by Brian Lewis, has gender parity with an executive board of 50-50. You also need international agencies lending support and offering opportunities with workshops and seminars and mentorship programs, such as the one we had in 2017 with TAFISA and UNESCO in a partnership that afforded not only Trinidad and Tobago, but throughout the Caribbean to participate in the workshop Achieving Gender Equality in the Caribbean through our activity. How was the concept developed? The Trinidad and Tobago Olympic Committee president, a passionate advocate for gender equality, conceptualized this project. He's constantly championing the need for gender equality, and at various panels and conferences worldwide, he has called for gender equality, including in 2018, when he called for the next IOC president to be a woman. Fortunately, we have Brian with a message with us here today.
What traditionally has been perceived as old boys club. It's patriarchal, it's male-dominated, and the pipeline has traditionally been clubbed with men mentoring men and men making men part of the succession. Programs such as Featured Female was created to address that glaring gap. It doesn't make any sense being hypocritical about it. The fact is that we need more women involved at the decision making and leadership table. We need more women and young girls getting involved in sport, remaining involved in sport, and encouraging other women and young girls to participate in sport. Featured Female is important in creating the environment and the pathway for more women, girls, and young women to be involved in sport, not just being involved, but being involved in a safe, secure, nurturing environment.
So we thank Mr. Lewis for that, and I'm hoping he's joined us here today to talk about the project, The Future's Female. The project itself, it seeks through collaboration and partnership to encourage and empower increased participation of women and girls in all aspects of sport and physical activity, not only as athletes, but as coaches and administrators. The project provides access to funding opportunities for workshops and courses that is targeted at females in all aspects of development. A very important aspect of it is that it is targeted at females. The project objectives to ensure that Team TTO female athletes are given the help they need to translate and elevate their talent to the Olympic podium. We are yet to have a female athlete that has medaled at the Olympic Games. Another objective is to use our workshops and seminars like the one we did with UNESCO and TAFISA as a platform to educate and generate awareness. It's to promote education and champion the sustainable, positive social change. It ensures our objectives ensure full and effective participation and equal opportunities for leadership. And most importantly, to end all forms of discrimination against women and girls. The Trinidad and Tobago Olympic Committee took a targeted approach to this project, The Future is Female. And when it was launched in 2017, we looked at what other opportunities available. With coaching programs, we had 7 international coaching programs that have been offered, of which 6 of them we have afforded to female coaches. We attend multi-sport games, Pan Am Games, Commonwealth Games, and in those games, we have ensured that the women have had the opportunity to lead. And of the 5 games that we've had during this period, 4 of them have been led by female chef de missions. And as we head towards Tokyo 2020, the chef de mission for this games will be a female. We have an annual conference. It's in its 4th year on advancing women's leadership. And this has been moderated and facilitated by females. Not only do we take a targeted approach to cater the education and the using the females in the games, we've also honored our females at our annual awards. Between 2017 and 2020, each year our keynote speaker has been female, both past and present athletes who have told of their journey. The annual awards distributed include the Future is Female Award, where the award is given to a promising athlete, coach, or administrator in sport. The awardee in 2018 was Tennille Campbell, and she has gone on to qualify in cycling for Trinidad and Tobago as the first female cyclist ever to qualify for an Olympic Games. There are a number of threats, of course. If you don't have the right balance, it's a fragile balance of the leadership and the drivers in the Olympic organization, such as ours, that will promote and ensure that gender equality is there, then it becomes a serious threat. And just generally with the current COVID environment, it's been more of a challenge for our women who've had to balance working at home and often have also the responsibility of looking after children. Gender equality and equity is different all over the world. However, we must each do our part in our own space. We must continue to focus and target opportunities for young women who follow and ensure that if we have had a breakthrough as a female leader, in my case, the first female Secretary General of the Trinidad and Tobago Olympic Committee, that we must now create the environment for many to follow. Thank you for the opportunity for doing this presentation on our project, The Future is Female. The words of one of my own mentors, Catherine Ford, she said, "Let this be your mantra. I am capable and my brain works." Let's all look at our future as the future is female. Thank you very much again for the opportunity. Right, that's it.
The future is female, our first case study, and I think it probably is in Trinidad and Tobago. I'm hoping actually that Annette is joining us now live as well from the Caribbean. Are you there, Annette?
Sunny outside. I'm sorry I'm not outside with you, but thank you so much for being able to do this.
That's quite all right. I wish you could bring some of that Trinidad and Tobago sunshine to Europe for us. I was struck by many things in your presentation, particularly Brian Lewis's very graphic description of sport as an old boys club, a patriarchal society. I guess we've heard that kind of description for a long time now, though. And you made various suggestions and recommendations for the steps to try and defeat that. But I sense your most powerful message is very much about role modeling and leadership. Why is that?
I think that if actually you think about the theme that's gone all the way through this summit each day, it really does tend to be that the leadership, the people that are enthusiastic, passionate, are really the ones that will be the driver. And when I say leadership, it doesn't necessarily only mean one person. Leadership means maybe the group of people at the top. Just as we could look at the Small Cities Summit and say that they've had a leadership that has made this successful. Not necessarily one person, maybe a team, but leadership is very important in how we drive whatever project it is. And this particularly, I would say, the Future is Female has been driven by not only Brian Lewis, but a group of people that are very keen and enthusiastic about gender equality.
Thanks, Annette. Do stay with us as we hear our second case study. So for me, the fascination of smart cities and sport is that it plays into the intersection of these two great edifices, the worlds of smart urban design and the exciting role that sport can play. And our case study number 2 takes that intersection a further stage, adding the dimension of gender equality in women's sport into the Venn diagram. Sally Neeshaw is a London-based policy consultant who's been reimagining cities for something like 25 years. She's worked for the European Commission, for many major cities and international networks, often focusing on gender issues. Sally's currently the programme expert of the Gender Equal Cities Initiative for URBACT, the European Exchange and Learning Programme for Cities. We hope Sally's going to join us live later on as well, but she has also kindly pre-recorded her presentation for us.
Hello, my name is Sally Neeshaw and greetings from London. It's my pleasure to speak to you today as part of the 2020 Smart Cities and Sports Summit. I'm Programme Expert for URBACT, the European Exchange and Learning Programme for Cities, and I lead on the Gender Equal Cities Initiative. Today I'm going to address the question, is gender equality in sport a new development in cities' policies on sport? I'll talk about ways in which cities can address gender-based inequality both generally, but also specifically in relation to exercise and sport for women and girls. Our work is in the European Union, but many of the principles and examples are transferable globally, and our report is available at urbact.eu. But first, why gender equality? First of all, inequality is persistent. Despite the leaps and bounds made over the past century, it's clear there's still a long way to go to achieve global gender equality. Inequality still impacts women and girls in the way that they travel, play, live, and work in urban environments. You can see from the infographic, the gender pay gap is 16% in Europe. And according to the World Economic Forum, it will take 257 years to close that economic gap globally. There are also gaps in political representation, in senior levels, in boardrooms, and in entrepreneurship. Secondly, we have SDG 5. This summit is looking at the relevance of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goal framework for sport and cities. For the first time, we have a specific goal in SDG 5 related to equality and empowerment for women and girls, and that gives us more impetus to deliver. Thirdly, cities can make a difference. Gender equality is everyone's responsibility and for everyone's benefit, and the international and national frameworks are really important. But cities are the level of government closest to citizens, and city design and services have direct consequences on everyday lives. There's a lot we can do at local level, and we need to step up to play that part. For those who are not familiar with URBACT, it's a European programme that supports exchange and learning between cities. It supports cities to work in integrated and participatory ways. By integration, we mean working across policy sectors, across departments, to find joined-up solutions to complex challenges. And by participation, we mean taking a multi-stakeholder approach, engaging with citizens and listening to their needs. So what can cities and local government do to promote gender equality, and how does that relate to sport, exercise and health? Here are some examples. Public space. Public spaces are where the public life of the city is played out, and a city that's attractive and accessible to everyone offers a better quality of life for citizens and visitors. Evidence shows that women and men exhibit different behaviours in public space based on gender norms. So urban planning, design and placemaking have gender perspectives. A city's physical structure can either reflect and amplify existing inequalities or conversely create more equal environments. For instance, we know that young women often disappear from public spaces because they may feel unwelcome or unsafe, and that affects their ability to socialise, to be active, to exercise. So taking gender and diversity into account when we plan urban environments, parks and playgrounds can improve accessibility, security and build active lifestyles that support healthy outcomes. Infrastructure such as better lighting, green areas and co-created social activity, including cultural and sports events that can take place in high streets, parks, city centres, can invite all community members to participate. And sports activities that meet their needs. Another example comes from the city of Trappes in France, who've invested in playground redesign to deconstruct gender stereotypes and the inequalities that then manifest themselves often in later life. Researchers noticed that boys often take up the central space in a playground, usually a football pitch, while girls are relegated to the corners. And that can also mean that unsporty boys and overweight children who don't want to play football can feel left out. The redesign prioritises gender-neutral colours, toys, and multiple worlds that with spaces for creativity, drama, as well as activity and games. A second factor is participation. Reaching out to women and girls is really important from all ages and communities, engaging with them to find out what exercise and sports that they really want. We shouldn't assume we know or what we are providing is right. An example in our report was a consultation to increase women's presence in public sports spaces and to highlight why women might feel uncomfortable and take action to make those spaces more inclusive. By undertaking a comprehensive review with both quantitative and qualitative activities, including interviews and focus groups, they exposed a disproportionate use of sport facilities by men, leading to poorer life quality and worse health outcomes amongst women. In one town in Romania, however, participatory interviews with women revealed easy and inexpensive measures to improve the situation. They included using images of regular women to advertise the facilities so that they can see themselves in that space, building equipment to meet all sport and fitness needs, like bikes and stepper machines and running dance fitness clubs. Having women-only times is important to help people build skills and feel comfortable, and also taking into account that women might have different health needs and may also need to bring children with them. There are lots of city initiatives that encourage girls and other underrepresented groups to exercise, such as girl-only skateboarding sessions and women-only swimming sessions. Thirdly, mobility infrastructure designed for active travel can make a difference to encourage more sustainable mobility that includes cycling and walking. Organising the city's mobility to prioritise these modes can make a real difference to keep pedestrians and cyclists safe. Good design can make it easy and safer for women and girls to incorporate that physical exercise into daily routines, like going to work, school, and leisure activities. And there are great examples of this from cities like Copenhagen. Another simple but important measure is public toilets. And this is really important also for older women. It can make the difference between them being confident to walk to the shops every day, keeping fitter, and maintaining their independence. With the pandemic this year, we've seen the gendered impacts in relation to the care burden and economic impact on women. We've also seen a renewed appreciation for green spaces, for the ability to be outside, to exercise, to connect, both for physical and mental health. And many community sports organisations will need support to survive in these times. In order to get all of this right, a central point is to use data-led approaches to deliver more equal services, such as the use of municipal facilities, budgets, and municipal space. So collecting sex disaggregated data is key. Observing and monitoring who's using the space and facilities. How can it be more equitable? How can we make sport in the city more inclusive? So coming back to the question, is gender equality in sport a new development in cities' policy on sport? The response has to be yes, and urban authorities can play a part. Our report gives 10 actions to kickstart the process. Gender equality in sport can be promoted at local level by participation, by reaching out to groups of women and girls to find out what their wants and needs are, and by designing specific interventions, especially reaching out to the women and girls who you may not be talking to already, who are from underrepresented groups. Also by integration, by talking to colleagues across departments such as education, health, care, mobility, urban planning, to identify more joint approaches that achieve the goals of both departments and create more enabling environments. Gender Equal Cities shows how when we create spaces for women's voices, women's needs and capacities, it's a necessary step towards building thriving cities and ultimately the right to the city for all. The report gives examples of many ways equality can be promoted across departments and policies. So please do take a look and join our LinkedIn group called Gender Equal Cities to continue this conversation. Thank you.
Sally, thank you very much indeed. I'm hoping that Sally is also now joining us live, this time I suspect from rainy and dark London. Is that right, Sally?
That's quite right. Rainy and dark it is, but nice to be here.
Yeah, not just the stereotype. I look out of my window and I see the same thing. Thanks so much for your presentation. I really loved your optimism about the role of cities and all the practical examples that you gave. But I'm also struck by, again, the quote from Brian Lewis. I wonder whether part of the challenge here is that you might argue that historically cities themselves have been run largely by men. Perhaps cities themselves are a patriarchy, are an old boys club. Is that a barrier to the kind of things you're talking about?
Yes, of course it is. I mean, you're right that cities have historically been designed by men and to a large degree still are. That's changing. We have more women architects, urban planners, girls encouraged to follow that career path as well. And more women leadership. I think there were the previous speakers talked quite a lot about leadership, and we need more female representation in the leadership at city level. I think you saw from the infographic only 15% of mayors in Europe are women, for example. So the city, as I said, public space and cities have a gender perspective, and it's something we need to address. We need to be more aware of. We need to look at what's happening in the city, who's using the city, and make sure we listen to and engage women and girls to address those barriers.
Sally, stay with us. Thank you. Can I come back to Leela, who I hope is with Melanie in the studio still? Leela, I would love your reflections on both of those case studies. First of all, perhaps in Trinidad and Tobago, the future is female, and the really importance of female role models.
I think we're all saying the same thing, and that's true. It's very important. We've been saying this over and over again. Women are not heard. We need women in leadership in the sense that we need the female perspective, and that is what is missing. I think we've been saying the same thing now for years and years and years, and we're not doing something right because it's not happening. But I was also, I'm very interested in what Sally was saying as well. And I have to say, before you ask me any more questions, because I think this is important. It's about cities, mayors. You talked about public toilets. So I'll bring this up as well. This is so important. But all the research shows that girls drop out everywhere in the world in adolescence, out of sport, out of PA. And there are lots of reasons for that. And boys drop out for different reasons. But girls drop out. There is one topic that we never talk about, because first of all, in many parts of the world, it's a taboo topic. So maybe, I shouldn't even bring it up, but menstruation. We are doing research, there's no research. And why not? For example, we have public toilets, but we don't offer hygiene products to girls free of charge, because this, girls drop out of sport. We have some research now. A friend of mine, Dr. Sarah Zip at the University of Stirling, is working on this. And maybe in Europe, it's not such a big problem because people have the money, but in other parts of the world, this keeps girls out of school. This keeps girls out of sport, for sure. So this is something that we really need to address as well. And education, it's a taboo subject. You don't talk about it. Coaches have no clue. And we just say, okay, girls drop out of sport, and we don't address this issue. So why not give free, because this is not a cosmetic thing. This is something that costs money as well. Why not give free products to all girls who do sport and physical education, to encourage them, for example. But I have
Let's go to Sally on that particular point, because Sally, is that part of the ecology of the way a city works, part of the society that pervades in cities that again needs to change?
I completely agree with Leela that we need to keep having this conversation and pushing the conversation, even though it's uncomfortable for some people, that we need to keep talking about the realities of women's bodies and women's lives and viewing, in a way, women and girls as experts. We are experts in these things that maybe aren't brought into the design of services and space enough. So I completely agree with that. In terms of things like, there are campaigns also in Europe about period poverty. It still happens in Europe that girls don't have access to the hygiene materials that they need, and it prevents them from being active, from being able to participate. So that is a problem, something we need to talk about. It's not something that's come up in the city conversations, I have to say, so far. Public toilets is a massive one that comes up, because that's also for mothers of young children, and for young people and for older women. So I agree, we need to keep talking about this and bringing these kind of issues into the public domain, and making planners and architects and city designers aware that they need to build this into the way that they're constructing our cities.
And build it into coach education. Build it into coach education.
Yep, indeed.
Yeah.
And Leela, can I come back briefly to the Caribbean example? What gives you greater confidence from the model of and the program that you've heard about from Annette, that indeed, at least in Trinidad and Tobago, the future will be female in leadership?
Yes, it's fantastic. I mean, this mainstreaming, taking this problem and really working on it separately, building leaders, giving girls the opportunity to speak. This has to be done all the time. And it's not something you can stop, because now you see also there's a backlash. You come up and there are lots of backlashes. So this is exactly the type of thing that every National Olympic Committee and every International Sport Federation should be doing. We speak about it a lot. I've been involved in it for a long time. Everyone has the intention of doing it, but not many people have this kind of program. So it's fantastic. There are very good surveys. For example, I read the survey of the International Sailing Federation. They've done a fantastic survey, and they've come up with a lot of good stuff, and now they're implementing it. So in a few years' time, I want to know how these things change International Federation as well. So well done to Trinidad and Tobago. And having the male allies, men standing up and saying, we need this. This is what we need. Yes. Definitely.
Annette, can I bring you back in here? Because you heard Sally earlier on talking about the importance, she echoes your words about the importance of leadership. I wonder what perhaps you've picked up out of Sally's work on the role of cities and the way cities work. What can you draw on from her work in that space to help your project in Trinidad and Tobago?
I think it's what Sally was saying about having more women at the table in terms of the decision making, in terms of the planners, etc. That's very important because having the men planning and then the women just following in after is often what causes, and then you have the problems that arise. It's very important that at every aspect of the planning that you have input from women. So Lima was just talking about coaches being educated. The reality is we should have female coaches heading a lot of our national teams. At the moment, the statistic to the Olympic Games is something like 11% of the coaches are female. That statistic has to change. But the only way we will find that we'll have to do it is you have to push at it. You have to target it. You have to say, I mean, the quota systems come up and you say, okay, is it tokenism? Is it that, the person doesn't have to have the skill set, they just have to have a woman? There are many talented women out there. It's just that they haven't had the opportunity. So at every level, even at the planning level in cities, etc., they must allow women at the table.
Annette, I don't think anyone could disagree with the importance of female role models, but I sometimes wonder whether being a female role model and a leader almost expects too much. It puts too much responsibility on. Being a leader is tough in itself. Being expected to represent a gender at the same time, is that fair?
Has it ever been fair for women? I think that we accept the role. We know that it's never going to be the same. I could say it not only in terms of women. I mean, as there's all aspects, more on deeper levels that this could go to, but in terms of that's what it is. It is what it is, and therefore you don't say, oh, well, this is too much. I'm a leader. You just get on with the job. And women are very good at that. And I think during COVID, we saw the real leaders in the world, New Zealand, Germany. When it came down to the crunch, the people that really handled the decisions well were the women. So, as I said, it could be a tough thought. You're saying, okay, women as leaders. No, that's the job. Get on with it.
Very clear. Thank you. Sally, there are, of course, cities all around the world represented at this summit, listening to you now. If you could give them just a couple of pieces of simple advice that could make a huge difference for women in sport in their communities, what would it be?
First of all, I just wanted to add to the previous conversation one of my favourite mantras, which was from Shirley Chisholm, who was the first African-American woman to run for president in the US, who said, if they don't give you a seat at the table, bring your folding chair. So that's a kind of echoing at the previous comments. We just have to do this and keep going and insisting on a part in the leadership. In terms of advice for cities around the globe, I think the most important thing is to understand your city, that you can develop better gender equality policies if you have the right data. You have to collect disaggregated data so you can see what's happening. You can then have a much more evidence-based and rational approach to allocating resources, which includes space, budget in cities. And the second thing I think would be, well, two things which I said in my presentation: participation. Always be talking to different groups of women and girls, understanding that women are not a homogenous group. They have different needs across age, racial groups, sexuality. You need to be thinking all the time about your community and listening to people's needs, bringing them in, getting them involved in the design of the city and services. And finally, integration. There are some things where several departments working together can make a better result. You can solve several problems at once if you work together. And I think mobility is a good example of that. If you have a good mobility system in your city, it's sustainable, it lowers your carbon, it allows people to be more active and therefore more healthy. So having those joint solutions is good. But I think probably involve and listen to women and girls, create space for them, create safe spaces for them to express their needs. Don't assume you know, listen and engage.
Thank you, Sally. Back to Leela, if I may. You've travelled all the way around the world, worked in many, many different cities. I wonder, just picking up on one of the points Sally was making there about diversity, how different are the cultures in each of those cities around the world, and what impact does that have on this mission to put women in leadership roles?
Very different cultures, very different problems. I was in Japan for 4.5 years. I have just come back from Saudi Arabia. Very different problems. Sometimes I feel like, oh God, where do I start? You know, you have to really start with the basics. But people are ready. I mean, I'm so impressed with the Saudi Arabian girls that I have met, the athletes. They're so ready and so willing. So we need just to help them. But yes, sometimes it's very difficult. And I'm Sri Lankan, you know, originally. When I go back, I have to have these difficult conversations still. Starting from scratch, talking about the basics, trying to show that we need more women, you know, why is it important? You would say that this is something that we all understand. Yes, let's get on with it. No, you go back and start. But it's something you just have to keep doing all the time, and that's why the gender mainstreaming is so important. Little girls have to be taught the history of the women and sport movement. Now, when you learn that, it's very empowering, but we don't teach this. You know, you don't know the history of the women and sport movement, so this has to be taught as well. So the conversation starts in different places at different points, and the more you travel, the more you feel that. And sometimes some conversations are really difficult in Europe. You know, you come up against things that you wouldn't expect. So it's not only one place is good, the other place is bad. It's all over, and depends on who you're talking to. So it's a conversation we just have to keep having all the time.
Leela, thank you for that. I remember fairly early in this session, I asked you whether you ultimately felt optimistic or pessimistic about the impact of COVID. I'd like to finish actually by putting exactly the same question to Sally and Annette. And if you can briefly just give us a sense of, do you feel positive or negative about what COVID-19 is doing in this space? Annette first, perhaps?
Yeah, I think that Leela hit the nail on the head a little while ago and said, there's opportunities. Look at this opportunity. I've had an opportunity now to talk about our project here in Trinidad and Tobago because of the whole virtual world, etc. There's so many opportunities now to keep pushing the gender equity agendas and talking to more and more people about it, getting more and more opportunities to hear about the best practices around the world like we did over the last 2 days. So I am always positive, and I always see it as opportunities. We mustn't forget the data. We must understand what's happening behind the scenes. But I say, let's be positive about it and use the opportunities as an accelerator.
Sally?
I'm quite worried about the impact of COVID on women and girls. I think we've seen the economic impact, the care burden impact, the impact in relation to violence. So unless we actually centre women and girls in the recovery, there's a danger that existing inequality will be exacerbated and we go backwards on those stats that don't look good already. So I think we have to, the UN, head of the UN has said we need a women and girls centred recovery. It's being talked about a lot. We need to hold people to that and say that, for instance, recovery packages, let's see half that money being focused on activities, economic activities, care activities that relate to women and girls. So I think we just have to keep holding feet to the fire to make sure that happens. Otherwise, we could go backwards, not forwards.
Well, Sally, Annette, Leela, thank you so much. And I have to say, I've found that an inspirational session. And if nothing else, I hope we've given at least some evidence that smart citizen sport is not necessarily an old boys club and a patriarchy. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. And
thank you. Thanks. Wonderful.
As I have to hand over to our next session now, if I can just remind our three speakers from that session to log out as you depart so that other speakers can join us next. But thank you very much indeed for our first session. Just before our last session begins, I don't know about you, but I'm feeling the need to be a little active, to stretch a little bit. I'll tell you what, could you all, wherever you are in the world, see if you can stretch, maybe stand up a little bit. Can you, if you can, stand, have a stretch, a bit of a shake. I'm now imagining I'm causing chaos all around the world with laptops flying and coffee cups disappearing. But there is a reason. But instead of me messing around with this energy injection, let's hand over to the expert.
Hi everyone, my name is Clarence Perez-Diaz and I'm going to be doing a workout for you to give you some energy for the summit. Please put your volume on and let's do it. We're starting, opening ourselves. We start with our right ankle, on commence avec la jambe droite. Yes. On change, we change. Are you ready? We're going to squat. On va partir avec les petites fesses derrière. We go with our little ass back. Ready, guys? C'est parti. Ha. 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 Super. Very good. Let's do some lambada. On part un peu à droite. Very good. On part de l'autre côté. We go the other side, guys. Super. What about starting to run a bit? On commence à courir un petit peu sur place. Yes. Ha. Yes. Big circle, des grands cercles. Yes. Big one. Yes. Little one. In front. Petit. Yes. Big one. Super. Yeah. Ha. Ready, guys? We're going for biceps. C'est parti. Ha. Very good. Yeah. We're going to row, guys. On va râler. Ready? C'est parti. Let's go. Ha. 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 Yes. On va changer. We change. Arms up. 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 Ha. Ready to go again. C'est parti. Yeah. I'm strong enough. Yes. You're strong enough. Yes. Show me. Yeah. Very good. Open your chest. You ready? Super. Yeah. We roll. On run. Ha. Ha. Yes. Super. Yeah. We roll. On monte. Let's go. Ha. 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 Yeah. We go. Very good. Super. Yeah, you're strong enough. I'm strong enough. Very good, guys. Are you ready? I am. Enjoy the summit, guys. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you, Clarence. I don't know about you, but I'm exhausted by that. And what, of course, you didn't necessarily know was that we have cameras watching all of you all around the world. Some of you were joining in and some weren't. The team in Holland, I thought, were really impressive, I have to say, very impressive. Anyway, why were we doing that? Well, apart from the fact that it's always good to get a bit of energy into these sessions, the other reason is that our final session of the day is focusing on activity. Well, I don't know about you, but in the old days, pre-COVID-19, when I used to travel, I'd always put my running shoes in the bag, and no matter where in the world I ended up, I'd find half an hour or so to go for a jog. It helps with jet lag, keeps the body working, and gives something of an insight into the city that you're visiting. And it appears that I'm not alone. And now more and more cities and destinations are using activity programs for fitness tourists, while others are leveraging the major sports events that they host to encourage mass participation activities in parallel. So our final session explores this trend and looks at how it can work best for host cities, for sport, and for the wider community. Once again, we'd love to see any comments you have, experiences and questions on the topic through the chat forum. Thank you for those. Now, our expert commentary for this session is coming from two leading academics from the Mount Royal University in Calgary, Canada. In addition to setting the scene on our topic as a whole, we're going to hear about an initiative from Calgary called the Active City Collective. Here in their recorded presentation, I'm pleased to introduce Professors David Legg and David Finch.
Good afternoon. My name is David Legg, and along with my colleague David Finch, we're both professors at Mount Royal University in Calgary. Today we're going to talk about a project that's we have a lot of passion for, which is called the Active City Collective. And our focus for today is going to be on growth through leveraging the active economy. Before we begin, we want to acknowledge and recognize that the traditional territories of the Niitsitapi, the Blackfoot, and the people of the Treaty 7 region in southern Alberta, which includes the Siksika, the Piikani, the Kainai, Tsuut'ina, and the Stoney Nakoda First Nations. The city of Calgary is also home to the Métis Nation of Alberta Region 3. Now, sport and active tourism starts at home, especially in times of COVID. And Calgarians need to identify itself as a sport and an active city if we want to market ourselves as an active and sports city internationally. Our hope today is to demonstrate how we can build bridges between cities and sport governing bodies to leverage sport and an active economy and an active city in a more active, healthy, and inclusive city perspective, and showcase, is our hope, good practices in building partnerships in meeting these goals. So more specifically, we want to look at how to leverage sport events for the development of active tourism, and then there'll be two case studies following this video presentation. Now, all of this, the development, the nascent burgeoning of the Active City Collective goes back to, I guess in some respects, the 1988 Olympic Games, Winter Games, which were held here in Calgary. And probably the greatest result of those games is an identity of Calgarians as being in a world's great sport city. It put Calgary on the map. And Dr. Finch and I were both involved in Calgary's other bid to host the Games in 2026, the Winter Olympic and Paralympic Games in 2026. The plebiscite was held, which failed, and the result of that was that the bid was no longer pursued. And this was an example of many of the things that we saw as being challenging within the active sector. And this was not alone. There were discussions as it related to the building of a field house. There were discussions related to cycle tracks. There were discussions related to the closing of facilities that were at Canada Olympic Park, which is now called Winsport, which were a legacy of having hosted the Games in 1988. And really what this got down to was Calgary questioning whether it was still a great sports city. And so Dr. Finch and I then embarked on a process where we brought together colleagues, friends who were involved in what we eventually called the active economy. And we debated and discussed this. One of the things that struck us was that of the 50 individuals that we invited to a collective meeting at Mount Royal University in Calgary was that very few of them knew one another. And so this really struck us as an example of the siloed nature of the active economy. And one of the challenges that then led perhaps to the plebiscite failing as it relates to bidding to host the 2026 Olympic and Paralympic Games. One of the conversations that we took, though, was sport, the appropriate terminology. And so we actually debated and discussed and tried to come up with a variety of terms that we thought reflected what eventually was called the active economy. And that term active was what really stood out. So the problem that emerged from this collective, which has since become the active economy movement and collective, was that Calgary's rich regional active ecosystem is, as I mentioned earlier, fragmented and inefficient. So it's that siloed nature. And the result is its contribution to Calgary's economic, human, social, and environmental prosperity is underleveraged. And we would argue specifically as it relates to tourism. So the Active City Movement Collective was founded in 2019, and it's a collaboration of not-for-profit, for-profit, and public sector organizations and individuals engaged in Calgary's regional active economy. This is completely volunteer-driven and led by two academics at Mount Royal University, but it's a collaboration of hundreds of people representing the diversity in Calgary, which is Canada's third most ethnically diverse city, and the diversity as it relates to First Nations, persons with disabilities, men and women, LGBTQ, and certainly new Canadians. Where we want to focus for the remainder of this presentation is looking at how the active economy can ensure a robust tourism industry. And this is extremely important within a Calgary context. And I know we have two other individuals who are going to be speaking about examples of this following. Calgary is a city of just over 1 million people, but yet we have 7.7 million annual visitors that contribute to our economy, and it contributes close to $2 billion a year. And these are international visitors. What I think is interesting, perhaps, for today's conversation is that close to 70% of these international visitors engage in at least one active service purchase. The other part that I think is important to recognize is that of these international travelers, they stay on average 19 nights within Calgary and the region surrounding Calgary, the Rocky Mountains to our west most commonly. And that's compared to 2.4 nights for domestic travelers. Dr. Finch was quoted in a Canadian Broadcasting Company, a CBC article last year, talking about how most places in the world would kill for our natural assets. So in part, the Bow River, where people come from around the world to fly fish, the Rocky Mountains to our west, which has some of the greatest skiing in the world. And that Calgary's got a wonderful opportunity. And he thinks, and we think, that we're just scratching the surface in regards to growth opportunities. So I'm now going to pass it over to Dr. Finch, who's going to now give a bit more clarity as it relates to the active economy and how it will contribute to a tourism industry. Dr. Finch.
Thanks, David. So the Active City Collective over the last 18 months have been working through a planning process to weave together the diverse active economy that we currently host. Our estimation is the active economy in Calgary encompasses over 4,000 organizations, employ about 43,000 people, and really, one of the anchors to it is the volunteer culture that drives the active economy. This is a direct legacy of the 88 Olympic Games. We estimate Calgarians volunteer roughly just under 14 million hours a year to the active economy, which is by far the largest voluntary sector in the city. The mission of the entire Active City Collective is to really focus on linking the active economy to community prosperity, measuring by different dimensions of community prosperity tied to economic, human, social, environmental prosperity. If you could flip the slide, David. So this is what we lost during the Olympic bid process, and which is absolutely essential as we move forward to growing the active economy, and specifically looking at linking to the fundamental infrastructure investments that are going to be required to rationalize the value of these investments, not just to tourism, but value them for the citizens, in fact, that will be funding a significant portion of these investments. This is where the bid fundamentally broke down. People did not understand, and it was poorly communicated, the value of investing in Olympic high-performance facilities and how it would contribute to the prosperity at both an individual and a family level, but as a community level. Now, community prosperity is a very abstract term. For the model that we've been using, we've actually built it based on the New Zealand Living Standards framework that I would encourage you to look at. And it's based on the 4-quadrant model of economic prosperity, which obviously ties to economic growth measures, human prosperity, which focus on physical and mental well-being, social prosperity, which focuses on the influence and contribution has to social capital and social belonging and social cohesion. And the last element is environmental prosperity, which is about the sustainability of the investments for future generations. David? So the model we've selected is we started looking at what was done in the late 1990s around the concept of the creative economy and how the creative economy looked at far more than just a direct causal relationship, but looked at really the network and the influence of creating a cluster of skills and competencies, a cluster of different organizations and a culture that drove growth. And the model we've used is Nashville, which is Music City, USA, and how they have systematically over a period of 100 years, but more specifically in the last 30 to 40 years, built the entire music infrastructure and the system out, the capacity of the system, very intentionally, all the way from embedding music and country music at the earliest level of education, starting in kindergarten, right through to PhD programs. And what that capacity building with intent has done is built an engine for growth. And now is not only one of the leading cities for country music, it's in fact one of the leading cities in the world for music. David? So what is the regional active economy? So let's move on and talk about the sectors. David, you can flip the slide. So we've defined it as including 11 sectors. I won't have time today to go through them all, but it involves everything from what we call the delivery sectors of organized sport and active recreation to all the dimensions of health and wellness, which contribute to the capacity of it, all the way down to the lower left-hand quadrant, which talks about an active life. So that looks at the ability to embed everything from active transportation into your life to become an active city. And as you'll see on the left there, active tourism is central to the active economy. What this slide is intended to show is the interdependency of the subsectors that create an active city. And therefore, they cannot sit independent. They are, in fact, there's a dependency for them to work together to be able to leverage and grow. David? So what we've developed is what we call a community value chain. And the community value chain maps the different inputs generating activities that contribute to outputs that ultimately contribute to community prosperity. This is a very simple mapping of the various clusters. Now, the work we've been doing over the last year really starts dissecting the inputs, which generally consider built inputs around built capital, economic capital. It looks at human and structural capital, environmental capital, the assets that currently have or what we will need to generate activities and outputs that ultimately lead to community prosperity. Now, the key with this conversation is we are not about sports. We're not about organized and active recreation. We're about the anchor is about community prosperity. And this is often lost. We are focused on how do we build a better city in a better region, in a better community. We are not focusing on how do we better build a better ski jump or how do we build a better sector. That is secondary to the ultimate goal. And that sometimes often gets lost in this process. David? So what this shows is just a conceptual model of the complex inputs and outputs between the variety of sectors. And what this is intending to show is the sectors need to understand how certain sectors either contribute to it and how it contributes to subsectors that ultimately contribute to the ability to generate value for the community. And until we start thinking like this and start thinking more networked as an ecosystem as opposed to a very linear what's in it for me zero-sum model, we're not going to be able to grow the active economy to meet the needs. And certainly when it comes to the active tourism sector, that will be inherently constrained. David? So what we've been doing, as I mentioned, over the last 18 months is developing something called Playbook 2030. Playbook 2030 we're in the final month of the process. It'll be released in early November. And it involved engaging 23,000 Calgarians, which makes it the largest public engagement activity in the city's history. And through that, we looked at understanding from the bottom up what Calgarians want to see in the future of their active city and how, in fact, we can contribute to it in a coherent and collaborative manner. The key, though, is, again, focused on the ability for the ecosystem to work collaboratively, recognizing we're only as strong as our weakest link. David? So I'll just wind up by these are the 6 key pillars of the strategy we are moving forward with and then activating. Step 1 is a shared vision. Sounds simple. It sounds like academic management talk, but it's something that doesn't exist today. And that leads to inherent conflict because what drives shared vision is an investment strategy. Understanding how you measure investment and the purpose of investments. Do I spend $1 on a cycle track, or do I spend $1 on a professional sport or high performance facility? We have to understand what the shared vision is and how these work together to be able to do it effectively. Embed in life. Embed in life, sorry, Dave, if you could go back. Embed in life is about the fact that we need Calgarians to identify that the active economy is critical to them, essential to them, and act on it every day. Building community, talking about the ability to engage all Calgarians in the entire region as key components of the active economy. It's not about just Olympic athletes or high performance sport or professional sports. Everyone has to be part of it to succeed and grow. Innovation and growth. Innovation and growth thinks about the ability to look at new innovative startups and technology sectors and professional service sectors that can contribute to the growth and think about the sector fundamentally differently. And the last 2 is drive sustainability, is that everything we do has to be targeted around creating a sustainable platform for the future. And the last element, which links back to the legacy of 1988, is the ability to inspire ourselves and others to recognize that Calgary is one of the world's leading active cities. Now, I want to thank you very much for the opportunity to speak today on behalf of myself and my colleague, David Legg, and we look forward to the rest of the session.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, David and David. And indeed, I hope David Legg is live with us now from Calgary. Can you hear us and see us, David? Excellent. Now I can see you, but I'm not sure I can hear you. I'm hoping it's a lovely, sparkling, chilly afternoon over in Calgary.
It is, actually, yeah.
Just as I thought. I was struck by... Yes, I can hear you fine now. That's brilliant. I was struck by many things in that fascinating model. In an earlier session at this summit, you would have heard about a different but very similar scheme called the Global Active Cities Network. And that's a labeling model which puts together policymakers in sport, in urban planning, in health and social care, with the aim of making the city active, but particularly focused on its citizens. I sense your model does something very similar, but extends that principle to the economy and to the visitor economy as well. The biggest challenge in all of that seems to be joined up policymaking, joining up the different components. How optimistic are you that you can crack that in Calgary?
That's a bit of a loaded question. I'd like to think I'm an optimistic person by nature, but it's not easy. These organizations are based on traditions and silos, bureaucracies, management structures that have been evolved and developed for years. And so trying to break them down to ensure that people are working together, connecting, collaborating is not particularly easy. But I think I'm optimistic in that people recognize the value and the economies of scale benefit by doing so. And perhaps the pandemic has forced our hands to be a bit more systematic and perhaps purposeful in working together to ensure that we are successful, and particularly from a tourism perspective, which has been challenged by the COVID-19.
David, I've got to ask you this one. If you had been, 3, 4, 5 years down this track, when a bid for an Olympic Games had come up. Would you be more optimistic about having public support?
Yes, I would have. Part of our argument as to why we thought the plebiscite failed was that we would have argued that our active economy was not working together in harmony. And it was in some respects working in antagonism to one another. And so, as opposed to an arts community, that Richard Flora talks about the creative class, we would argue that an active economy, an active class, perhaps, would have coalesced. And, I'm not necessarily suggesting that bids to host major games doesn't come with challenges and concerns. And so I'm not naive to those issues. However, I think, the arguments as to the benefits of hosting the games perhaps would have been more readily accepted and agreed upon by the populace as a whole had the active economy, been better organized, perhaps, or at least working in harmony to have shared messages and shared values.
David, stay with us if you would, please, because I'd love you to listen to the two case studies and then give your thoughts when we've heard them. So for the first of our two case studies, we're travelling virtually, of course, to Denmark and to the island municipality of Langeland. And from what I can see of Langeland, its spectacular coastline and waterfront have provided the most amazing basis for an active tourism strategy. Our guide to how that happened and how they're coping with COVID-19 is the region's head of business, culture and tourism, Jane Marie Jegind.
Langeland is a part of Denmark, and it actually means the long country. It's about 2.5 hours drive away from our capital. The island is very long, 52 kilometers long, but you are never more than 5 kilometers from the coast because it is so narrow. We have about 142 kilometers of coastlines, and in the one side we have calm water protected by land. On the other side, the more wild, windswept water. There are over 100 registered shipwrecks in the nearby seas, and we have 20 different fish species. We are only a population of 12,500 people, but we yearly receive around 500,000 of tourists. And then Langeland is a very green island. We produce 150% green energy corresponding to our use, so we export also green sustainable energy. Tourism and sport is important for the island, sustainable tourism. We have a lot of nature and a lot of animal life. For instance, we have a big population of wild horses. So tourism should be people that care for nature when they come by visiting us. And outdoor sport is a good combination with sustainability and sustainable tourism. Furthermore, we have focus on broaden the seasons. For instance, here in February 2021, we have our first winter bathing festival. We are a small island with nature and a lot of warm hearts and openness, but that's also our greatest potential. Outdoor sport is an area where we have an advantage over places and cities we normally can't compete with. We know that when people first have been to our island, they will return, and sport events is a reason to go. And then we just know you will come again because you are swept away by the wonderful nature. And outdoor sport combined with nature and the things that we can offer is a perfect match. First of all, we have figured out what our site-bound potentials are. We can't do anything, and we don't want to do anything on Langeland. We have looked for partners within a limited range. Our focus has been to use our site-bound potential, sustainable events and activities, and also where we have a local engagement and recognition. We do not need to attract 0.001% of the world's population. For us, it's more than enough to attract 0.00001% of the world's population. So we have to be excellent in what we do. And therefore, we have also looked into different kind of sport activities. What are our side-borne potentials? And we can see that underwater hunting, Langeland is a perfect place to do that. We have had the European Championship, we have the African Championship, and next year we have the Danish Championship in underwater hunting. It's a perfect place for SUP, for angling, windsurfing, kite surfing, diving, kayak sailing, and water leaping. So it's the activities connected with water that we are looking into. When we looked into what our strengths was, what the side-bound potential was, we also saw that it was different along the island. For instance, in the south, we saw a potential for water leaping, an extreme sport within water. And we are now planning to build a high tower to jump from. And in that connection, we have a discussion with our surf people, because they argue that a high tower in the harbor will take some of their wind away. And we have looked in that windsurfing is better in another place at the island. So we do a lot in trying to find the side-bound potential and also make it different places to have the uniqueness. But yes, you will have to go into also a long and good discussion to find compromises so that our local people can see the idea, because to us, when we are so small, it is necessary that everyone thinks it's a good idea, that we are working in the same way. So now we are actually in a process with making a local plan and also making fundraising for the actual buildings. Yeah, our underwater hunting is a very good success story. And it wasn't even the municipality who came on the idea. It was actually local enthusiasts together with the Danish Association for Underwater Hunting that discovered that one of the best places in Europe to do underwater hunting is actually at Langeland. So from there, we built on and developed the case. And as I said before, we have had the European Championship, we have the African Championship, and next year we have the Danish Championship. And when you go into that, you can also start to see other potentials. As I said in the beginning, we have over 100 registered racks out along the shores at Langeland. So diving after that is also coming in. And that has a potential that had shown itself after the underwater hunters started out there. So one thing leads to the next, but within the same kind of sport, you can say, or spare time activity. The most tourist at Langeland is Germans, and the next biggest group is Danes. And we have actually seen the opposite from many other places, because we have nature, we have space, we have luckily almost none infected with COVID-19 on Langeland, and haven't had very many. And this security, stability, free air, space enough has attracted a lot of people. So our high season that normally ends by the 1st of September is still going on. And we have never seen so many tourists on Langeland as this year. Actually, we were a little bit run over we hadn't expected so many. But again, that makes us quite sure that we are on the right path, also with all the sustainability thoughts. Langeland is a very sustainable island. We haven't just not made any case of it, because that's the way we live. But now we can also say, maybe we should say it a little bit louder, that yes, we are sustainable. And we can see that by the people coming, visiting us, driving to us. We have a bridge, but also sailing. A lot of sailors come visiting us too, and also with the ferry. So we are looking into continuing taking care of our nature, our sustainability, and our outdoor image. We have indeed learned that we should keep on to our plans. We don't have any big malls or any Disneyfication of things. We have a lot of authentic experiences where you come and go down in your pace, experience your family, yourself, your surroundings with a lot of cozy, nice shops. So holding on to this authentic mood, taking care of our nature in a sustainable way, and also developing the tourism area continuously sustainable. We are now not anymore in doubt that that's the right direction. And maybe before, someone had dreamt of having this big mall too, like all the others. But as I used to say, you don't get in the first place if you just go or drive after someone else. So I think the unique way that Langeland has chosen is also the way that we now know we should keep on to. If someone wants to play with us, I could see it could be very fun to make a marathon or triathlon event running from north to south on the long country, Langeland, because I think that running, extreme sport, bicycle, every water sports, running is a beautiful match, and you will definitely get an experience that you didn't expect.
Well, thank you, Jane. They're recorded, but I'm hoping that Jane is now actually live, connected to us. Are you there, Jane?
Yes, I am.
Excellent. And are you in Langeland at the moment?
Yes, I am. I'm in my office having some sights behind me from a beautiful island.
Well, do you know, I was going to suggest, if it had been daylight, I was so taken by what an amazing environment you have that you lift your camera up and put it out of the window to show us a bit more of the island. But alas, it's dark, I guess, right now, and probably very chilly.
Yeah, it's a little bit dark now, but if you come by, I can give you a tour.
I think that's an invite to all of us, where 500 people will turn up very shortly to this beautiful island with 12,500 people and over 500,000 tourists, we heard, and even more tourists this year because of COVID-19, which is extraordinary. What struck me is that you are very cleverly allying your unique environment with sport to create some unique and thoroughly authentic tourist experiences. But what lessons should all the other cities and sports listening to this draw from you that don't have those particular assets that you have? How could you encourage them?
If you asked 10 years ago what the potential on Langeland was, most of the Danes would say nothing. That's in the outer reach of the country. It's just going down and people are moving away from the islands. So I think if we can find some specific authentic potential. Everybody can, but you have to look for it, and you have to be realistic, and you need to get it in touch with the population, that they can see where you're going, because that's the combination where you make the uniquenesses. And yes, we also have some challenges and some things that could be better, but we have a population who tends to agree with us to look at the possibilities, not the limitations. And I think that's the reason why we can go forward and why we also have an increasing success.
I can only imagine with such a small population that pretty much all of them must be super sporty already. Or did you have to encourage the sense that sport was the way in which you could build this remarkable economy?
You don't need to be sporty to see that it has a lot of potential. If you go to some of the shops or all the shops in our city, they can see that you have more visitors coming. And you have a population who also knows that when it's summer, you don't close at 4 o'clock. You have open until 8 o'clock on Fridays if you are a hair shop where you get your hair, because the customers arrive at the island late Friday night to have to begin their week, for instance. Or you know that you need to drive off with a food truck to welcome the sailors when they have been out fishing all day. So they actually work from morning bis late night as long as we have visitors. But I must also admit that some of our inhabitants is looking a little bit tired now, because they still haven't got any summer holiday. And they have been working since we closed up the society after COVID-19.
It's been a long season, but it's a wonderful story. Thank you so much for sharing it with us. Please stay. I think you'll probably be interested in our second case study. It comes from a Belgian who currently lives in France, but he's really something of a global citizen, a regular business traveller. He wanted to find a way to combine his twin passions for exploring cities and running. And in doing so, he created something rather remarkable. To tell his own story, I'm pleased to welcome the co-founder of Run-In City, Oliver Lebleu.
Good afternoon, my name is Olivier and I'm the co-founder of Run-In City, an app specifically designed to mix both sports and tourism and to make you visit hundreds of cities around the world while running, walking, cycling, and more riding a bike, a scooter, or in a wheelchair. Did you know that there are 400 million runners worldwide? If it were a country, it would be the third largest country in the world, behind China and India. So we're talking here, if we're just talking about the runners, about a huge market. But if you add to this all the people who just want to walk, people who cycle, people who ride their scooters, people who ride their wheelchair, etc., the potential customers and users is far bigger than just the 400 million runners. The problem is that all those people find it difficult to motivate themselves when they're at home, because their running, walking, cycling time conflicts with other hobbies, but also work time, family time. There's always a good excuse not to go running, not to go walking. On the other side, when people are traveling in another city, they find it difficult to motivate because once they might have forgotten their gear. Two, they almost never know where to go running, where to go walking, cycling, etc. Very, very few hotels, tourism board, etc. can give them great places to go running, walking, cycling, etc. On the other hand, 80% of runners, walkers, they live and work in cities. Their proportion is so high that those cities have to provide engaging running, walking, cycling experiences for the residents, but also for all the visitors. All the more since all those cities are competing against each other on a local, national or international level to be the city which provides the best experiences, which has the best work experience, which has the best infrastructure to greet people. Basically, they want to rank high in the national or international rankings. What we do is we bridge the gap between the users, the runners, the walkers, the cyclists and everything, and the local ecosystem, which is made of the city, the town hall, tourism board, transport companies, all the sport events, etc., etc. And we do this with our Running City app, which allows you to discover hundreds of cities around the world while running, walking, cycling, pushing your wheelchair, or even pushing your pram. Basically, the app is a mix between a vocal GPS and a multimedia, multilingual audio guide. Running City guides you through the city vocally and comments every point of interest as you pass by. But we also integrate smart data to make those tours much smarter, to give a much better experience to the runners, cyclists, etc., by integrating some live data to the tours. What I find the most interesting is to integrate allergen data and pollution data in real time, so that we can improve the experience and warn people if they're subject to an allergy, for example, or if they have asthma and they want to avoid the most polluted area. Of course, when we design a tour, we try to take into consideration the average pollution level, and we'll go to the nearest street if this one is less polluted than the original one. Our mission is to give our users a reason to run, to walk, to cycle. Because we all know that it's medically proven, people who exercise are much more happier, much healthier, and in a work environment are much more productive and creative. And we basically motivate them with 4 different legs. The first one is to keep them entertained while they're running, because the more entertained they are, the more they will exercise. And we do this very simply with touristic information, with local playlists, etc., etc. Then some other people are more interested in being challenged. So we might make them go up the hill to make them sweat a little bit, and that's their challenge. We might also give them the opportunity to do a much longer tour as they would usually do. The third one will be calling on the civic sense of other people. And some of our users will realize are just going out to run, to walk, to cycle, to do what we call plugging, because we incite them to basically pick up a few litters on the way and put them in a bin without any obligations. But it makes them feel good, and that's what we want them to end up with. And then you have people who want to be rewarded for every step they make. And we have a point system which basically allows our customers, our clients, and we'll tell you more about them, to reward all the users on their tours, or to reward them to do a specific challenge, or to just exercise more. And basically, there are numbers of running, cycling, walking apps on the market, but most of those apps are performance apps. They basically ask you to perform. And that only interests, in our view, about 10-15% of all the users. We believe that there's a far better market for the experiences, and that's what we provide. We believe that the market for experiences is far bigger than the market for performance. And the good thing as well is that we can work alongside the performance apps to provide both an experience and record your performance. So basically what we want with our Running City app is to people to get up and move more often, and in the end, despite all the efforts that they've done, despite the challenge that they climbed, is to finish their run, their cycling tour, their walking tour with a huge smile on their face. And it works, because our users have run, at the end of last year, they had run 25 times around the planet with our app. We know it creates a great communication opportunity for our clients, because we've had something like 600 press releases in the local, national, international presses, on TV, on the radio. We've been lucky to be awarded some great awards recently. In 2019, for example, we had an innovation award at the CES in Las Vegas. We were the winner of the World Tourism Organization contest that awarded us the title of the most disruptive startup in the sports and tourism area in the world. And then we were voted the European Sports Tech of the Year 2019. So to tell you a bit more about our clients, we have great clients to date. So from the bigger cities like the city of Paris or Brussels, down to small villages of 300 people, because those small villages might be organizing some events and want to leave, or to occupy people, to leave a legacy after the event. But we also work with some of the brands, with some transport companies, with some hospitals, etc., because they're all convinced that sports and tourism go alongside, especially in these troubled times. So basically what we're trying to do is to surprise our users, to make them experience emotions, and in the end, to provide them with souvenirs that they might keep for the rest of their lives. So what we can offer to smart cities? Basically, we think that we can offer them a way to communicate to all the people that might pour into a city because there's a sports event organized. However big the sport event is, those digital experiences are a great experience to communicate and bring a different angle to your communication. Then during the events, what we noticed is that with those experiences, we can bring people to the whole city, not just around the grounds where the events happen. We can bring people to all the neighborhoods, even to neighborhoods that they would never go to. So it's a great way to push some neighborhoods that are not touristy at all. And then it's a great way during the event to occupy the accompanying people, like the athletes, the coaches, their families, their friends, all the visitors, to bring them to discover your city as you want them to discover, with the basic touristic information, with themed tours, with tours which are geared towards the events that you are organizing, etc. And then at the end of the event, and for the years after the events, those experiences are a great way to keep on pushing the heritage that was left during the event. For example, we can do tours that relate all the sport events which were used during the event. We can also tell stories about all the great performers that participated to the event, all the records that were broken, or any fun facts, anecdotes that happened during the event. Putting in place those experiences can be a great way for you to attract more tourists, to keep them entertained while they're in the city, but also to remind them how great your event was. And that's basically what we had to tell you today. So I'll leave it up to questions. Thank you very much.
Olivier, thank you so much. Olivier, I hope you're with us also live now.
Yes, I am.
Oh, fantastic. Olivier, I have to tell you, I am supposed to be the dispassionate, neutral moderator. However, given what I said at the start of this session about my own habits for going jogging in all the cities I visit around the world, I was just entranced by your development there, so much so that whilst you were speaking, I downloaded the app here and I've been looking at my nearest run, which is absolutely fantastic. I'm also struck by the fact that, Olivier, yesterday on a similar session, we heard a fitness expert, an activity expert, talking about the different sports apps, and I've tried quite a few of them. And he was making the point that sports performance and competitive apps work for some people and take you so far, but that he was looking for something else. What's your evaluation as to why you think experience and sport will do better than performance apps?
Well, I think first, thank you for downloading the app and enjoying the concept. I think the performance apps are needed, and I'm amongst the first ones, of course, to use performance apps. But very, very few people, less than 15% of people, are really into performance. Most people, as I mentioned earlier, need to be motivated by something different than performance. And this is where we come. For example, if we take the analogy of a marathon, for example, take the London or Paris marathon, you have 50,000 people running it. In fact, the first 5,000 people are there for performance. The last 45,000 people are there just to enjoy the experience and finish the marathon if they can. So I think but it's true. It's true in every sport, not just running. It's great to be pushed to do more, etc. But we think that people are looking for experiences. People are looking for to enjoy things, to smile, and this is exactly what was told us in the previous session. Is people just want to enjoy a region, an area. They just want to be there because they just want to be there and hopefully come back the next year. So, and by the way, you see in other worlds like the hotel world that everybody's pushing experiences. Take Airbnb, for example. They're pushing the experience. They want you to know the local area, to understand the local, everything local. We're going towards a completely different tourism, but also, I think, a completely different sport.
You're right. Airbnb now don't talk about visiting or being a tourist, but about living in. And also we heard from Jane that authenticity of the experience in Langeland is vital too. And I guess that's the same space that you're playing into.
Oh, exactly. What we want to do is, as you were mentioning earlier, when you go to a city for business reasons or just for personal, tourism reasons, you want to discover the best the city has to offer. And that's, of course, all the sites which we show, but it's also a number of fun facts that they want to know to understand the area better, to be much more enjoyable at your business dinner in the evening, because you know a few things here and there about the city you're in. So, yeah, I definitely am convinced, because I was the first one, of course, to need this app, because I was missing this type of experiences when I was traveling all around the world. And now it's amazing how, when you come back from a city, you've discovered something not recently, but in December last year, I was in Hong Kong because we won one of the prizes we talked about earlier. And with our local partners, we run one of the 10 kilometers run that we have in Hong Kong. And basically there was an elevation of 900 meters over 5 kilometers. So it was a serious elevation. So we did sweat a lot, but in the end, we ended up seeing the Bay of Hong Kong. And believe me, this is something that I remember for the rest of my life. We suffered to get there, but just the view from there is unbelievable. And so you just remember one tiny thing of a city, and that's enough for the rest of your life.
Olivier, just a brief comment, if you would, about the trials and tribulations of COVID-19. We heard in Langeland that actually, unusually, they have more tourists, more visitors, because of their particular unique location. I guess for your app, this is a bit of a challenge, because so few people are visiting other cities at the moment.
Yeah, you're right. I think we had to tell all our users to not use the app. Because in most countries we're restricted to a few kilometers around our living area. Now, what we see is that, of course, less and less people are traveling. So we don't tend to get the crowds of people who are traveling and visiting. We have not reached the number of quite the number of people that were using the app before the outbreak in February or March. However, what we see is that more people are rediscovering their city, but also their local region, and they're moving to the next village or the next small city to play. And of course, most of the tourists were local this summer, and I think it might be the case again early next year, or probably for the first semester. So we're counting, and it's generating a lot of interest from the different cities, is to be able to offer experiences for the residents who are staying in their city, but also for the tourists which are coming just from 20, 30, 100 kilometers away.
Well, Olivier, thank you. I shall certainly be giving it a try next time I get to go jogging in London or wherever I'm eventually able to travel to. Thank you. Stay where you are. Can I come back to Professor David Legge? David, in Calgary, I hope you were as fascinated as I was by those two case studies, but I'd love to have your reflections and your review of both the case studies, please.
Well, first of all, I want to go visit Denmark. And second of all, I think it's about time I go for a run. I thoroughly enjoyed both presentations. And I would say in both instances, they reflect, how these disparate entities do fit within a larger umbrella of an active economy. And so, certainly the app example, we would argue that, here locally in Calgary, there actually is a sport technology infrastructure and industry that's burgeoning, but perhaps going unnoticed and lacking respect and not benefiting from an economies of scale. And so an example would be Garmin as a local example. And, there are other app developers in Calgary who could be working together, perhaps with Olivier, to ensure that, when people come to Calgary, they're benefiting from this collective of like minds. Similar to the example of Denmark. Calgary being a winter city, we certainly don't benefit from the access to the water that they do there, and so we don't do as much stand-up paddleboarding, as an example, although we do some. But similarly, we have winter sport kind of collectives that are similar to the ones that were described in a Danish perspective. And again, it's those organizations, and I think she did a really good job of recognizing how all these activities kind of work together to then promote the island externally. And so that's one thing that we were trying to do with this idea of an active economy, is to recognize that if we partner together, we're going to do a much better job of being able to attract and retain the tourists, both nationally within Canada, and then once the borders open, internationally as well.
Thank you very much, David. Just to wrap this session, can I go back briefly to Olivier and to Jane to see whether there were any lessons from the Calgary experience that you heard that could be of benefit in your models? Jane first.
Yeah, definitely. The accessibility to provide the tourist to the experience, because that's actually some of our challenges. It is how to make sure that they actually discover the authentic things that we have. And something like this is on its way out, and a homepage is also on its way out. So how do we secure that they actually get the information spot on the time that they need them? And I think that was very inspiring.
Thank you, Jane. Olivier?
On our side, it's the accessibility as well, except that we have a different way, of course, to providing the information, which is because it's an app, because it's digital, it's instant, and can change as between the seasons, for example, etc. So compared to a paper brochure, for example, or leaflet, we still need the accessibility and people to understand that our tools exist, and but in the end we can provide a very digital service which adapts to the for example to the strange situations that we're living at the moment.
Well, friends, I fear our time is up. But Jane, Olivier, David, thank you so much for sharing those fascinating stories and insights. I always say to Melanie, when she kindly asked me to moderate these sessions, that the reason I do it is at the end, I find myself feeling stimulated, informed, challenged, excited, inspired. And I have to say, in the sessions tonight and in last night, that's proved itself once again. So from me, thank you very much indeed. It's been a great pleasure being with you. And now back to Melanie.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Bill. Thank you very much to all of you. The summit is coming to an end now. We spent together a very exciting summit, exclusively virtual for this year, but very exciting. It has been my privilege to provide you with this online platform. I hope you enjoyed the conferences, and as Bill mentioned that it was a bit challenging and exciting for you as well. We wanted to offer you an overview of the many ways of sport can be used to achieve the sustainable goals. And I think that we have heard fascinating contribution. I will not go through the different sessions to give you an overview or a synthesis of the different sessions that we organized during these 2 days, because the good thing with the virtual is that you will be able to find all the different videos, presentation, and all the panel discussion online at the beginning of next week. Yesterday, when we opened the summit, actually, we started with a very important point of the Sustainable Development Goals, the importance of partnership. I hope that the Smart Cities and Sport is an important partner for you when it comes to sports and cities. I would like to thank a few people before just closing the summit. First, my board, the Executive Committee of the World Union of Olympic Cities, and all the members, because of their continuous support in order to develop the Smart Cities and Sport Network. Of course, all the official partners and institutional partners of the Smart Cities and Sports Summit as well. The City of Lausanne, who hosted this virtual summit, but also the Canton de Vaud, GAIFS, and the International Olympic Committee. I would like to thank all the different speakers who agreed to give a little bit of their time, and also for the authenticity and transparency to share with us the challenges that they faced with the crisis of COVID, and for their creativity and innovation in order to adapt the answer to that. A special thanks also for Philippe Forêt and Bill Morris, who accepted at the very last minute to jump in order to facilitate a few sessions. And of course, thank you to all of you who have joined the summit online for the session, but also for the marketplace and the networking room. It has been my pleasure to see you even for a few minutes during the different sessions. I really hope to see you next time in real. I think, as we see here in Europe, the shadow of maybe a second lockdown, it has been a light for all of us to be able to meet, even if it's virtually. I would like also to thank the crew here in Lausanne, the IT and video crew, Florian, Stéphane, Julien, Benny, Rémi, and Rebecca, for your professionalism, for your flexibility as well, but also for your communicative good mood. It has been a real pleasure doing this today. And last but not least, I would like to thank my team that was in the backstage as well. Claudia Fornari, you know, of course, her through the different emails and with the platform, but also Eloise Signé, who just joined the team 3 weeks ago. I really hope that you will be able to meet her in person next year. And my colleague Anne-Sophie Nivet, who was unfortunately unable to join us here for the summit. But once again, I hope that we will meet all together next year for hopefully the next edition of the Smart Cities and Sports Summit. Thank you very much to all of you.